Most people believe they are making choices. They choose careers. They choose relationships. They choose goals. But very few people choose their lives. They select options from menus they did not design. They follow scripts they never questioned. They inherit expectations and mistake them for identity. Analytical thinkers recognize a difficult truth. Most lives are lived by default, not by decision. This is not because people are weak or unintelligent. It is because choosing a life is psychologically demanding. Choice requires responsibility. Responsibility requires uncertainty. Uncertainty requires courage. Most people avoid this chain. Instead, they accept identities that arrive ready-made. The good child. The responsible adult. The successful professional. The supportive partner. The dependable provider. These roles offer safety. They also limit authorship. The first reason people never choose their lives is early conditioning. From childhood, behavior is shaped through reward and punishment. Approval teaches what is acceptable. Disapproval teaches what is dangerous. Over time, this becomes internalized. People stop asking, "What do I want? What matters to me?" They start asking, "What is expected? What will be approved?" Analytical thinkers notice when expectation replaces intention. Another reason people avoid choosing their lives is identity inheritance. Families, cultures, and institutions pass down narratives. People like us do this. This is how success looks. This is realistic. These narratives feel normal because they are familiar. Analytical thinkers question familiarity. Another powerful reason is fear of existential responsibility. Choosing a life means accepting ownership over outcomes. If the choice fails, there is no one to blame. This responsibility feels heavy. Many people prefer to be disappointed by a path they didn't choose than accountable for one they did. Analytical thinkers accept responsibility as the cost of freedom. Another reason people avoid self-authorship is comfort in structure. Predefined paths reduce decision fatigue. They tell you what to pursue, when to pursue it, how success is measured. Analytical thinkers understand that structure can support life, but should not define it. Another reason is social comparison pressure. Choosing a unique path invites scrutiny. Deviation attracts attention. Analytical thinkers accept being misunderstood. Another reason people never choose their lives is misunderstanding freedom. Freedom is often imagined as limitless choice. In reality, freedom is constraint chosen consciously. Analytical thinkers choose constraints aligned with values. Another reason is fear of regret. People avoid choosing because they fear choosing wrong. They wait for certainty. Certainty never arrives. Analytical thinkers accept that regret is unavoidable, but misalignment lasts longer. Another reason is role entanglement. Over time, people become attached to who they appear to be. Changing direction feels like betrayal. Analytical thinkers distinguish between growth and inconsistency. Another reason people avoid authorship is external validation dependency. Approval becomes a compass. Without it, people feel lost. Analytical thinkers replace validation with alignment. Another reason is over-identification with past decisions. People believe previous choices define future obligation. Analytical thinkers allow revision. Another reason people avoid choosing their lives is existential avoidance. Questions like, "Who am I? What do I stand for? What is worth doing?" create discomfort. Avoidance feels easier than engagement. Analytical thinkers tolerate discomfort to gain clarity. Another reason is mistaking busyness for purpose. Full schedules prevent reflection. Analytical thinkers create space intentionally. Another reason is confusing success with authorship. Achievement does not equal choice. Analytical thinkers separate accomplishment from agency. Another reason people avoid choosing their lives is narrative momentum. Once a story is started, it feels wrong to stop. Analytical thinkers rewrite stories mid-chapter. Another reason is fear of social cost. Choosing differently may disappoint others. Analytical thinkers accept disappointment as unavoidable. Another reason is lack of existential language. Many people have never been taught how to think about identity and meaning. Analytical thinkers develop this language deliberately. Another reason people never choose their lives is outsourcing meaning. They expect meaning to emerge automatically. It does not. Meaning is authored. The central lesson of this chapter is foundational. A life is not discovered. It is written. And most people live inside drafts written by others. In the next chapter, we will explore existential anxiety and the fear of freedom, and why freedom often feels frightening rather than empowering. Freedom does not ask what you want. It asks what you are willing to be responsible for. Chapter 2. Existential anxiety and the fear of freedom. Freedom is often romanticized. People imagine freedom as relief, expansion, or happiness. They picture a life without constraints, pressure, or obligation. But when freedom actually appears, the dominant emotion is not joy. It is anxiety. Analytical thinkers understand a difficult psychological reality. Freedom is frightening because it removes excuses. When paths are chosen for you, responsibility is diluted. When expectations are inherited, blame has somewhere to go. When roles are predefined, failure feels explainable. Freedom removes these buffers. Existential anxiety emerges when a person realizes no path is guaranteed. No authority can decide for them. No identity is fixed. No outcome is fully predictable. This realization destabilizes the mind. The first source of existential anxiety is choice overload. When everything is possible, nothing feels safe. The brain seeks structure, certainty, and predictability. Freedom offers none of these by default. Analytical thinkers recognize that freedom without structure feels like free fall. Another source of anxiety is outcome ownership. If you choose freely, the results belong to you. Success cannot be credited to fate. Failure cannot be blamed on circumstance alone. This level of ownership feels heavy. Many people prefer constrained lives because constraints distribute responsibility. Analytical thinkers accept responsibility as the cost of authorship. Another source of existential anxiety is identity instability. Without predefined roles, the question "who am I?" becomes unavoidable. Roles answer identity questions for you. Job titles, social positions, relationship labels. Freedom dissolves these answers. Analytical thinkers tolerate identity uncertainty long enough to build something authentic. Another source of anxiety is absence of guarantees. Freedom offers no assurance that effort will pay off. There is no promise that choices will lead to fulfillment. Analytical thinkers act without guarantees. Another reason freedom creates anxiety is irreversibility awareness. Some choices cannot be undone. Freedom makes this visible. Analytical thinkers treat irreversible decisions with care, not paralysis. Another source of anxiety is meaning responsibility. Without external scripts, meaning must be created. This feels daunting. Many people avoid freedom by clinging to borrowed meaning. Analytical thinkers author meaning intentionally. Another reason freedom feels threatening is social exposure. Choosing your own path invites judgment. Deviation attracts scrutiny. Analytical thinkers accept misunderstanding as part of authorship. Another source of existential anxiety is loss of comparison anchors. Without a standard path, it becomes harder to measure progress. Analytical thinkers replace comparison with alignment. Another reason freedom is uncomfortable is ambiguity endurance. Freedom requires living with unanswered questions. Analytical thinkers develop tolerance for ambiguity. Another source of anxiety is decision permanence illusion. People overestimate how final decisions are. Analytical thinkers remember that most paths allow revision. Another reason freedom is frightening is internal conflict surfacing. Without external direction, internal contradictions appear. Analytical thinkers face internal conflict directly. Another source of anxiety is fear of wasted potential. With freedom comes the fear of choosing poorly. Analytical thinkers redefine potential as engagement, not optimization. Another reason freedom creates anxiety is lack of external validation. Without approval signals, self-trust must replace validation. Analytical thinkers build internal trust gradually. Another source is existential isolation. Freedom reveals that no one can live your life for you. Analytical thinkers accept existential solitude without withdrawing from connection. Another reason freedom is resisted is emotional exposure. Authentic choices reveal true desires and fears. Analytical thinkers allow emotional honesty. Another source of anxiety is loss of narrative safety. Pre-written stories offer comfort. Freedom requires writing without knowing the ending. Analytical thinkers accept unfinished narratives. Another reason freedom is avoided is fear of regret ownership. Regret feels heavier when choices are self-authored. Analytical thinkers accept regret as part of living consciously. Another source of anxiety is collapse of should language. When shoulds disappear, decision clarity must come from values. Analytical thinkers clarify values to replace obligation. Another reason freedom feels overwhelming is responsibility for pace. No one tells you when you are on track. Analytical thinkers define their own timelines. Another source of existential anxiety is confrontation with mortality. Freedom highlights finitude. Time becomes personal. Analytical thinkers act with awareness of limited time. Another reason freedom is frightening is absence of permission. No one gives approval to begin. Analytical thinkers give permission to themselves. Another source of anxiety is identity authorship effort. Building a self requires ongoing effort. Analytical thinkers accept identity as a process. Another reason freedom is resisted is comfort with predictability. Predictability reduces anxiety. Freedom increases it. Analytical thinkers choose meaning over comfort. Another source of existential anxiety is loss of excuses. Without constraints, inaction becomes visible. Analytical thinkers accept responsibility for inaction as well as action. The core lesson of this chapter is this: existential anxiety is not a flaw. It is the emotional signal of freedom. Those who avoid freedom avoid anxiety. But they also avoid authorship. Analytical thinkers do not eliminate existential anxiety. They learn to carry it without surrendering direction. In the next chapter, we will explore identity as something built, not found, and how self-authorship replaces the search for a true self. Freedom does not feel safe. It feels honest. Chapter 3: Identity is built, not found. Many people spend years searching for their true self. They believe identity is something hidden, waiting to be uncovered through introspection, therapy, travel, or the right moment of clarity. This belief feels comforting. It is also misleading. Analytical thinkers understand a more accurate and demanding truth. Identity is not discovered. It is constructed through choice. There is no fully formed self waiting underneath uncertainty. There is only potential, shaped by decisions, actions, and commitments over time. The idea that identity must be found creates paralysis. People wait for certainty before acting. Once I know who I am, I'll decide. Once I feel aligned, I'll commit. But alignment follows action, not the reverse. Analytical thinkers act first, then refine identity through feedback. One reason people believe identity must be found is fear of responsibility. If identity is discovered, it is not chosen. If it is chosen, responsibility follows. Analytical thinkers accept that authorship includes responsibility for who they become. Another reason is cultural storytelling. Popular narratives suggest there is a single authentic self. In reality, humans are adaptable, contextual beings. Analytical thinkers reject the myth of a fixed essence. Another reason people search for identity instead of building it is avoidance of commitment. Choosing an identity requires exclusion. To become one thing is to not become others. Analytical thinkers accept limitation as part of authorship. Another reason is overvaluation of feeling. People wait to feel like someone before acting as them. But feelings lag behind behavior. Analytical thinkers behave into identity. Another cause of identity confusion is role collapse. When roles change, job loss, relationship endings, transitions, people feel empty. Analytical thinkers distinguish between roles and self. Roles are expressions, not foundations. Another reason people struggle with identity is external mirroring dependence. They define themselves by how others respond. Analytical thinkers build identity internally, then test it externally. Another cause is perfectionism. People delay committing because they fear choosing wrong. Analytical thinkers treat identity as iterative. Another reason people believe identity must be found is romanticization of authenticity. Authenticity is not purity. It is coherence over time. Analytical thinkers define authenticity as alignment between values and action. Another cause of confusion is over-intellectualization. People think about identity instead of living it. Analytical thinkers understand identity through practice. Another reason people feel disconnected is contradiction intolerance. Humans contain contradictions. Analytical thinkers allow complexity without fragmentation. Another reason identity feels unstable is context switching. People act differently in different settings and assume this means they are inauthentic. Analytical thinkers understand identity as adaptable, not inconsistent. Another reason people search for identity is fear of social cost. Building an identity requires standing by choices. Analytical thinkers accept social friction. Another cause is misinterpreting change as inconsistency. Growth changes identity expression. Analytical thinkers allow evolution without shame. Another reason identity feels elusive is narrative disruption. Life changes faster than stories. Analytical thinkers update narratives deliberately. Another cause is over-attachment to labels. Labels simplify complexity but restrict growth. Analytical thinkers use labels lightly. Another reason people avoid building identity is existential exhaustion. Choosing repeatedly feels tiring. Analytical thinkers build habits that express identity automatically. Another cause of identity confusion is outsourcing meaning. Without values, identity lacks structure. Analytical thinkers anchor identity in values. Another reason people struggle is comparison pressure. Others appear more certain. Analytical thinkers recognize that certainty is often performance. Another cause is fear of being wrong about oneself. People fear committing to an identity that may later feel incorrect. Analytical thinkers accept revision as part of authorship. Another reason people search endlessly is belief in permanence. They think identity must last forever. Analytical thinkers build identity for the present phase. Another cause is emotional avoidance. Building identity reveals desire, fear, and vulnerability. Analytical thinkers face these honestly. Another reason identity feels unstable is lack of agency practice. Agency strengthens with use. Analytical thinkers practice choosing. Another cause is waiting for permission. People look for validation before committing to who they are. Analytical thinkers grant permission to themselves. Another reason identity is difficult is responsibility for meaning. Identity gives life direction. Direction requires effort. Analytical thinkers accept effort as necessary. Another cause of confusion is identity as performance. People perform roles for approval. Analytical thinkers perform roles consciously. Another reason people search instead of build is fear of authorship failure. If identity is chosen, mistakes feel personal. Analytical thinkers accept mistakes as part of construction. Another cause is attachment to past selves. People cling to who they were. Analytical thinkers honor the past without being bound by it. Another reason identity feels unclear is lack of continuity practice. Identity strengthens through repeated aligned action. Analytical thinkers repeat behaviors intentionally. Another cause is expecting clarity before action. Clarity arrives after engagement. Analytical thinkers engage early. The core lesson of this chapter is this: identity is not a destination. It is an ongoing project. You do not find yourself by waiting. You build yourself by choosing, again and again, what you stand for, what you tolerate, and what you pursue. In the next chapter, we will explore roles, masks, and the self you perform, and how people confuse performance with identity, often losing themselves in the process. Identity is not revealed. It is authored through action. Chapter 4. Roles, masks, and the self you perform. Every person performs. This is not deception. It is social reality. We adapt language, tone, behavior, and posture depending on context. We become different versions of ourselves at work, with family, among friends, and in public. Performance is not the problem. Confusing performance with identity is. Analytical thinkers understand a critical distinction. A role is something you do. It is not something you are. Most people lose authorship when roles harden into identity. They stop asking who they are becoming and start defending who they appear to be. The first reason people confuse roles with identity is role-reward reinforcement. Roles come with approval, praise for being reliable, validation for being successful, acceptance for being agreeable. Over time, approval becomes addictive. Analytical thinkers notice when approval begins to shape self-definition. Another reason roles become masks is fear of rejection. People learn early which versions of themselves are welcomed. Unapproved traits are suppressed. Analytical thinkers recognize suppression as survival, not truth. Another reason roles harden is role accumulation. As responsibilities grow, people stack roles. Professional, caregiver, partner, provider. Eventually, there is no space left for authorship. Analytical thinkers consciously differentiate responsibility from identity. Another reason masks form is expectation inertia. Once a role is established, others expect consistency. Change feels disruptive. Analytical thinkers accept that growth will disappoint expectations. Another reason people lose themselves in roles is role efficiency. Roles simplify interaction. They reduce friction. But efficiency is not authenticity. Analytical thinkers choose friction when necessary for alignment. Another reason masks persist is performance anxiety. People fear that removing the mask will reveal emptiness. Analytical thinkers understand that emptiness is not absence, it is space. Another cause of role entanglement is identity outsourcing. When others consistently reflect a role back to you, it feels real. Analytical thinkers validate identity internally before externalizing it. Another reason people cling to roles is status protection. Roles confer status. Letting go risks loss. Analytical thinkers prioritize self-respect over status. Another reason masks feel permanent is time investment bias. People feel obligated to continue roles they invested heavily in. Analytical thinkers recognize sunk cost fallacy in identity. Another cause of role confusion is language limitation. People describe themselves using role-based nouns. I am a manager. I am a parent. I am a helper. Analytical thinkers reframe identity using verbs and values. Another reason roles dominate is conflict avoidance. Maintaining a mask avoids difficult conversations. Analytical thinkers tolerate discomfort to preserve alignment. Another cause is emotional labor normalization. People overperform emotional roles until exhaustion. Analytical thinkers protect emotional boundaries. Another reason people confuse masks with self is external consistency pressure. Society rewards predictability. Analytical thinkers allow inconsistency during growth. Another cause is role identity fusion. People fuse worth with performance. Failure then feels existential. Analytical thinkers separate dignity from output. Another reason masks persist is lack of reflection time. Without pause, performance becomes default. Analytical thinkers create space intentionally. Another cause is over-adaptation. People adapt so thoroughly they forget original desires. Analytical thinkers periodically reassess alignment. Another reason roles dominate is fear of social cost. Unmasking risks misunderstanding. Analytical thinkers accept being misread. Another cause is false authenticity myths. People believe they must always be the same everywhere. Analytical thinkers understand contextual integrity. Another reason masks become identities is reward asymmetry. Performance is rewarded immediately. Authenticity is not. Analytical thinkers invest in long-term coherence. Another cause is internalized expectations. External expectations become internal voices. Analytical thinkers learn to identify which voices are theirs. Another reason people cling to roles is uncertainty avoidance. Roles provide certainty. Analytical thinkers tolerate ambiguity. Another cause is performance identity fatigue. Living as a mask drains energy. Analytical thinkers notice fatigue as a signal. Another reason masks persist is confusing consistency with integrity. Integrity is alignment with values. Consistency is repetition. Analytical thinkers prioritize integrity. Another cause is role moralization. Roles become moral obligations. Analytical thinkers distinguish duty from self. Another reason people lose authorship is role inheritance. Roles are passed down unconsciously. Analytical thinkers question inherited roles. Another cause is fear of being ordinary. Roles provide distinction. Analytical thinkers accept ordinariness as freedom. Another reason masks dominate is avoidance of inner questioning. Roles answer questions externally. Analytical thinkers answer them internally. Another cause is performance becoming self-soothing. Praise replaces self-trust. Analytical thinkers build internal grounding. Another reason people struggle to remove masks is absence of replacement identity. Without authorship, removing a role feels like collapse. Analytical thinkers build values-based identity beneath roles. Another cause is misinterpreting adaptation as betrayal. Change feels disloyal. Analytical thinkers redefine loyalty as honesty. Another reason masks persist is narrative attachment. Roles fit stories others expect. Analytical thinkers rewrite stories. Another cause is fear of existential exposure. Without a role, you must face yourself. Analytical thinkers accept exposure. The core lesson of this chapter is this: roles are tools. Masks are protections. Neither is your identity. Analytical thinkers use roles deliberately without letting them define the self. They perform when needed. and remove the mask when it no longer serves alignment. In the next chapter, we will explore responsibility without certainty, and how self-authorship requires owning choices even when outcomes remain unknown. You are not what you perform. You are what you stand behind when no one is watching. Chapter 5. Responsibility without certainty. Responsibility is often misunderstood. People assume responsibility requires certainty, clear information, predictable outcomes, and confidence in success. When certainty is absent, they delay commitment and avoid ownership. Analytical thinkers understand a harder truth. Responsibility does not wait for certainty. It exists because certainty is impossible. If certainty were guaranteed, responsibility would be unnecessary. Responsibility matters precisely because outcomes cannot be known in advance. This is where self-authorship becomes real. The first reason people resist responsibility is fear of being wrong. Mistakes feel heavier when choices are self-authored. When decisions are imposed, error feels explainable. Analytical thinkers accept that error is inseparable from ownership. Another reason people avoid responsibility is outcome fixation. They believe responsibility means guaranteeing success. It does not. Responsibility means standing behind a choice regardless of outcome. Analytical thinkers separate ownership from results. Another source of resistance is blame avoidance. Blame feels lighter when authority is external. Self-authorship removes scapegoats. Analytical thinkers accept accountability as the price of freedom. Another reason responsibility feels overwhelming is decision permanence illusion. People believe choices lock them forever. Most choices do not. Analytical thinkers distinguish reversible from irreversible commitments. Another source of discomfort is moral exposure. Responsibility exposes values. When you choose, you reveal what you stand for. Analytical thinkers accept visibility without defensiveness. Another reason responsibility is avoided is emotional discomfort tolerance. Owning decisions requires tolerating anxiety. Analytical thinkers carry discomfort without surrendering agency. Another source of resistance is loss of external validation. Self-authored decisions may not be praised. Analytical thinkers replace validation with self-respect. Another reason responsibility feels heavy is absence of guarantees. People want assurance that effort will be rewarded. Responsibility offers no such promise. Analytical thinkers act without promises. Another source of resistance is identity fragility. Mistakes threaten self-image. Analytical thinkers separate worth from outcome. Another reason responsibility is feared is regret anticipation. People imagine future regret and freeze. Analytical thinkers accept regret as survivable. Another source of avoidance is decision diffusion habits. People involve others to dilute ownership. Analytical thinkers seek input without outsourcing choice. Another reason responsibility feels threatening is loss of innocence. Once you choose, you cannot claim ignorance. Analytical thinkers accept maturity as irreversible. Another source of discomfort is ethical ambiguity. Some decisions have no clear right answer. Analytical thinkers choose what they can defend. Another reason responsibility is resisted is effort visibility. Self-authored paths lack clear milestones. Analytical thinkers measure alignment instead of applause. Another source of fear is comparison exposure. Choosing differently invites scrutiny. Analytical thinkers accept being judged. Another reason responsibility feels burdensome is internal conflict exposure. Choosing forces prioritization among values. Analytical thinkers accept trade-offs consciously. Another source of resistance is overestimating consequence magnitude. People imagine catastrophic outcomes. Analytical thinkers assess realistically. Another reason responsibility is delayed is hope for rescue. People wait for circumstances to decide. Analytical thinkers do not wait to be saved. Another source of discomfort is accepting limitation. Choosing one path excludes others. Analytical thinkers grieve possibilities without paralysis. Another reason responsibility feels heavy is uncertain identity outcome. Who you become is shaped by choices. Analytical thinkers accept becoming through action. Another source of avoidance is decision fatigue fear. People fear endless choosing. Analytical thinkers build principles to reduce decision load. Another reason responsibility is resisted is social harmony preservation. Choices may disappoint others. Analytical thinkers accept disappointment as unavoidable. Another source of fear is irreversibility awareness. Some choices matter deeply. Analytical thinkers approach such choices deliberately, not fearfully. Another reason responsibility feels overwhelming is lack of closure guarantees. Choosing does not end doubt. Analytical thinkers accept ongoing uncertainty. Another source of resistance is misunderstanding confidence. Confidence is often mistaken for certainty. Analytical thinkers act with commitment, not certainty. Another reason responsibility is avoided is comfort addiction. Comfort discourages authorship. Analytical thinkers choose growth over comfort. Another source of discomfort is existential exposure. Choosing reveals the self. Analytical thinkers accept self-revelation. Another reason responsibility feels heavy is ownership of failure narratives. Failures become personal stories. Analytical thinkers reframe failure as information. Another source of avoidance is fear of standing alone. Self-authorship is solitary. Analytical thinkers accept existential solitude without isolation. Another reason responsibility is delayed is waiting for permission. Permission never arrives. Analytical thinkers grant it to themselves. Another source of discomfort is accepting ambiguity as permanent. Some questions remain unanswered. Analytical thinkers live without resolution. Another reason responsibility feels frightening is loss of moral certainty. Values guide, but do not guarantee correctness. Analytical thinkers choose integrity over certainty. Another source of resistance is role dependency. Roles diffuse responsibility. Analytical thinkers step outside roles when needed. Another reason responsibility is avoided is misinterpreting fear as warning. Fear does not always signal danger. Analytical thinkers interpret fear cautiously. The core lesson of this chapter is this: responsibility is not about knowing you are right. It is about choosing anyway, and standing behind the choice. Self-authorship begins when you stop waiting for certainty, and start accepting ownership. In the next chapter, we will explore letting go of inherited narratives and how people unconsciously live stories written by others, long after those stories no longer fit. Freedom does not remove responsibility. It reveals it. Chapter 6: Letting Go of Inherited Narratives. Every life begins inside a story. Long before you choose anything, meanings are assigned for you. Expectations are modeled. Definitions of success, failure, strength, and worth are quietly transmitted. These are inherited narratives. They are not lies. They are not necessarily malicious. But they are rarely chosen. Analytical thinkers understand a crucial truth. Most people live inside stories they never consciously accepted. Inherited narratives shape how people interpret. What is possible? What is respectable? What is dangerous? What is selfish? What is too much or not enough? These stories feel natural because they are familiar. But familiarity is not truth. The first reason inherited narratives persist is early internalization. Children do not evaluate narratives. They absorb them. Messages like, "People like us don't do that. That's unrealistic. You should be grateful. Don't cause problems. Success looks like this," become internal reference points. Analytical thinkers learn to identify which beliefs were absorbed before choice existed. Another reason inherited narratives persist is emotional bonding. Narratives are often attached to love, belonging, and safety. Challenging them can feel like betraying relationships. Analytical thinkers separate love from obedience. Another reason people cling to inherited narratives is social coherence. Shared stories maintain harmony. Deviating introduces tension. Analytical thinkers accept tension as the cost of authorship. Another reason narratives endure is identity fusion. Stories become intertwined with self-concept. Letting go feels like losing oneself. Analytical thinkers recognize that loss is often expansion. Another reason inherited narratives persist is fear of judgment. Deviation attracts scrutiny. Analytical thinkers accept being misunderstood. Another cause is moral framing. Narratives often frame deviation as wrong, selfish, or irresponsible. Analytical thinkers distinguish morality from conformity. Another reason people struggle to let go is role reinforcement. Roles are rewarded when narratives are followed. Analytical thinkers step outside roles consciously. Another cause is success anchoring. If a narrative led to some success, it feels validated. Analytical thinkers evaluate alignment, not partial reward. Another reason inherited narratives persist is language limitation. People lack words for alternative lives. Analytical thinkers expand language to expand possibility. Another cause is fear of chaos. Stories provide order. Letting go feels destabilizing. Analytical thinkers build new structure intentionally. Another reason narratives endure is comparison reinforcement. Others living the same story normalize it. Analytical thinkers avoid mistaking consensus for correctness. Another cause is guilt conditioning. Questioning narratives triggers guilt. Analytical thinkers recognize guilt as a signal, not a verdict. Another reason people cling to inherited stories is loss aversion. They fear losing what the story provides: status, approval, certainty. Analytical thinkers assess what is lost versus what is gained. Another cause is intergenerational pressure. Breaking narratives feels like breaking lineage. Analytical thinkers honor history without being bound by it. Another reason inherited narratives persist is emotional simplicity. Stories reduce complexity. Analytical thinkers tolerate complexity. Another cause is avoidance of existential work. Writing a new story requires effort. Analytical thinkers accept effort as necessary. Another reason people resist letting go is fear of being alone. New stories may isolate. Analytical thinkers accept solitude without isolation. Another cause is confusing gratitude with obligation. Appreciating what was given does not require living by it forever. Analytical thinkers practice gratitude without surrendering authorship. Another reason narratives persist is authority imprinting. Messages from authority figures carry weight long after relevance fades. Analytical thinkers reevaluate authority claims. Another cause is internalized limitation. People accept ceilings they did not design. Analytical thinkers question assumed limits. Another reason inherited narratives endure is habitual interpretation. Events are filtered through the same story repeatedly. Analytical thinkers interrupt habitual meaning-making. Another cause is fear of regret. People worry they will regret abandoning a familiar story. Analytical thinkers consider the regret of staying misaligned. Another reason people cling to inherited narratives is moral comfort. Stories offer righteousness. Analytical thinkers choose integrity over comfort. Another cause is role dependency. Narratives tell people who to be. Analytical thinkers build identity independent of scripts. Another reason narratives persist is lack of alternatives. Without exposure to other ways of living, change feels impossible. Analytical thinkers seek diverse perspectives. Another cause is time investment bias. Years spent inside a story feel wasted if abandoned. Analytical thinkers treat life as revision, not waste. Another reason inherited narratives endure is emotional safety. Known stories feel safer than unknown ones. Analytical thinkers accept uncertainty. Another cause is misinterpreting resistance as danger. Resistance often signals growth. Analytical thinkers investigate resistance. Another reason people struggle to let go is loyalty confusion. They equate authorship with betrayal. Analytical thinkers redefine loyalty as honesty. Another cause is fear of rewriting the past. New stories challenge old interpretations. Analytical thinkers allow reinterpretation. Another reason inherited narratives persist is social reward structures. Society rewards conformity. Analytical thinkers accept delayed or private reward. Another cause is story inertia. Once moving, stories continue by momentum. Analytical thinkers interrupt momentum deliberately. Another reason people avoid letting go is existential grief. Abandoning a story means grieving what might have been. Analytical thinkers allow grief without retreat. Another cause is identity simplification. Stories make identity easy. Analytical thinkers accept identity complexity. Another reason inherited narratives persist is fear of standing exposed. Without a script, the self is visible. Analytical thinkers accept exposure. The core lesson of this chapter is this: you cannot author a life while living inside a story you did not choose. Letting go of inherited narratives does not erase the past. It creates space for intention. In the next chapter, we will explore self-authorship and living without permission, and how people step into ownership without waiting for approval. You do not owe your life to a story that no longer fits. Chapter 7: Self-authorship and living without permission. Most people are waiting. They may not realize it consciously, but beneath their planning, hesitation, and preparation is a quiet expectation. Someone will eventually give permission. Permission to change. Permission to stop. Permission to choose differently. Permission to become someone else. For many, this permission never arrives. Analytical thinkers understand a difficult truth. Self-authorship begins the moment you stop waiting to be authorized. Living without permission does not mean rebellion or disregard for others. It means recognizing that no external authority can grant ownership of your life. The first reason people wait for permission is social conditioning. From childhood, permission structures behavior. Ask before acting. Wait to be chosen. Seek approval. Over time, this creates an internalized authority that continues long after supervision ends. Analytical thinkers learn to identify when permission seeking is no longer necessary. Another reason people wait is fear of social consequences. Permission protects against criticism. Acting without it invites judgment. Analytical thinkers accept judgment as a cost of autonomy. Another reason permission feels necessary is responsibility diffusion. When permission is granted, responsibility feels shared. Without permission, ownership becomes complete. Analytical thinkers accept ownership fully. Another reason people hesitate is identity safety. Permission allows people to change without redefining themselves. Self-authorship requires identity revision. Analytical thinkers accept identity change as inevitable. Another reason people wait is fear of being wrong publicly. Permission reduces visible risk. Analytical thinkers accept visible risk as part of growth. Another cause is overvaluation of consensus. People mistake agreement for correctness. Analytical thinkers distinguish consensus from alignment. Another reason permission feels required is institutional reinforcement. Systems reward compliance. Self-authorship often exists outside systems. Analytical thinkers operate within systems without being defined by them. Another reason people wait is emotional dependency. Approval feels stabilizing. Removing it feels destabilizing. Analytical thinkers replace approval with self-trust. Another cause is narrative disruption fear. Living without permission breaks expected stories. Analytical thinkers rewrite stories consciously. Another reason permission feels necessary is moral confusion. People equate self-direction with selfishness. Analytical thinkers distinguish autonomy from harm. Another cause is habitual deference. Years of deferring judgment weaken agency. Analytical thinkers rebuild agency through practice. Another reason people wait is fear of isolation. Permission keeps people inside groups. Self-authorship risks standing alone. Analytical thinkers accept solitude without severing connection. Another reason permission feels required is performance comfort. Roles come with scripts. Self-authorship requires improvisation. Analytical thinkers tolerate improvisation. Another cause is uncertainty avoidance. Permission offers certainty through authority. Analytical thinkers act without guarantees. Another reason people hesitate is over-respect for tradition. Tradition offers continuity. But not all continuity serves growth. Analytical thinkers honor tradition selectively. Another reason permission feels necessary is external locus of control. People believe outcomes depend on others' approval. Analytical thinkers reclaim internal control. Another cause is fear of disappointing others. Disappointment feels like failure. Analytical thinkers accept disappointment as unavoidable. Another reason people wait is false humility. They believe choosing for themselves is arrogance. Analytical thinkers recognize self-direction as responsibility, not ego. Another cause is waiting for readiness. Readiness is expected before action. Analytical thinkers act into readiness. Another reason permission feels required is avoidance of finality. Acting feels irreversible. Analytical thinkers remember most choices are revisable. Another cause is status dependency. Permission protects status. Self-authorship risks loss. Analytical thinkers prioritize dignity over status. Another reason people hesitate is confusing guidance with authority. Advice is mistaken for approval. Analytical thinkers seek perspective, not authorization. Another cause is learned helplessness. Repeated constraint teaches passivity. Analytical thinkers rebuild agency intentionally. Another reason permission feels necessary is moral outsourcing. People want someone else to bear moral weight. Analytical thinkers carry moral responsibility themselves. Another cause is fear of being seen clearly. Acting without permission reveals intention. Analytical thinkers accept transparency. Another reason people wait is decision visibility fear. Private indecision feels safe. Public choice feels exposed. Analytical thinkers accept exposure. Another cause is attachment to being chosen. Being chosen feels validating. Choosing oneself feels unfamiliar. Analytical thinkers choose themselves deliberately. Another reason permission feels required is avoidance of existential loneliness. Self-authorship highlights individuality. Analytical thinkers accept existential solitude. Another cause is confusing freedom with recklessness. Permission seems to regulate risk. Analytical thinkers regulate risk through values. Another reason people hesitate is misunderstanding maturity. They believe maturity means compliance. Analytical thinkers understand maturity as authorship. Another cause is fear of precedent. Acting once creates expectation of continued autonomy. Analytical thinkers accept consistency with choice. Another reason permission feels necessary is language dependence. People lack words to justify choices. Analytical thinkers act without justification. Another cause is external validation addiction. Approval becomes emotional fuel. Analytical thinkers detox from validation gradually. Another reason people wait is misinterpreting anxiety as warning. Anxiety accompanies growth. Analytical thinkers do not obey anxiety blindly. Another cause is overconsultation. People seek endless opinions to delay action. Analytical thinkers consult, then decide. Another reason permission feels necessary is fear of narrative ownership. Without permission, the story is yours. Analytical thinkers accept authorship. Another cause is confusing respect with obedience. Respect does not require surrender. Analytical thinkers maintain respect while choosing independently. Another reason people hesitate is lack of precedent. No one they know has chosen differently. Analytical thinkers become their own precedent. Another cause is waiting for closure. Permission promises clean endings. Life rarely offers them. Analytical thinkers act amid open loops. The core lesson of this chapter is this: no one gives permission for a self-authored life. You take it, quietly, deliberately, and repeatedly. Self-authorship does not arrive as a single decision. It is practiced through small acts of ownership. Choosing without approval. Acting without certainty. Standing behind decisions. Accepting consequence. In the final chapter, we will explore choosing a life you can stand behind, and how self-authorship culminates not in perfection, but in integrity. Freedom does not announce itself. It appears the moment you stop asking. Chapter 8. Choosing a life you can stand behind. At the end of all thinking, there is a simple question. Not an easy one. Not a comforting one. But a clarifying one. Can I stand behind the life I am living? This question does not ask whether the life is impressive. It does not ask whether it is admired, successful, or optimized. It asks whether the life is owned. Analytical thinkers understand that a self-authored life is not defined by certainty, happiness, or perfection. It is defined by integrity. The first misconception people have is believing that standing behind a life requires confidence. It does not. Confidence fluctuates. Integrity endures. Analytical thinkers stand behind their lives even when doubt is present. Another misconception is that standing behind a life means never questioning it. Questioning is part of authorship. Analytical thinkers question without abandoning ownership. Another false belief is that a life you can stand behind must make sense to others. It does not. Meaning is internal before it is social. Analytical thinkers accept misunderstanding as part of authorship. Another illusion is that alignment eliminates discomfort. Aligned lives still contain fear, grief, and uncertainty. Analytical thinkers tolerate discomfort without retreating from values. Another mistake is believing that standing behind a life means getting it right. There is no final version. There are only defensible choices made in good faith. Analytical thinkers evaluate integrity, not correctness. Another misconception is that a self-authored life avoids regret. Regret is inevitable. What matters is regret you can live with. Analytical thinkers accept regret that comes from aligned risk rather than passive avoidance. Another illusion is that integrity requires consistency in outcomes. Integrity requires consistency in values. Analytical thinkers allow outcomes to vary while principles remain stable. Another false belief is that a life you can stand behind must be fully understood. Understanding lags behind living. Analytical thinkers act before narratives are complete. Another misconception is that authorship ends uncertainty. Authorship accepts uncertainty. Analytical thinkers do not wait for clarity to act. Another illusion is that choosing your life removes responsibility to others. Self-authorship includes responsibility, but not self-erasure. Analytical thinkers choose boundaries without abandoning care. Another false belief is that standing behind a life requires justification. Justification seeks approval. Integrity does not. Analytical thinkers explain when useful, not when required. Another misconception is that authorship is loud or dramatic. Most self-authored lives look ordinary from the outside. Analytical thinkers value quiet alignment over visible rebellion. Another illusion is that choosing your life means rejecting your past. Self-authorship includes honoring what shaped you without being bound by it. Analytical thinkers integrate the past without surrendering to it. Another false belief is that standing behind a life requires certainty about identity. Identity evolves. Analytical thinkers commit to direction, not labels. Another misconception is that values remove ambiguity. Values guide action through ambiguity. Analytical thinkers rely on values most when answers are unclear. Another illusion is that authorship guarantees peace. Peace comes and goes. Integrity remains. Analytical thinkers accept emotional fluctuation without abandoning alignment. Another false belief is that choosing your life isolates you. Isolation comes from inauthenticity. Authorship creates deeper connection, even if fewer people share it. Analytical thinkers accept fewer, truer connections. Another misconception is that authorship must be constant and heroic. Most authorship is quiet. Saying no. Leaving situations that no longer fit. Choosing differently without announcement. Revising direction without drama. Analytical thinkers author through small, consistent acts. Another illusion is that standing behind a life means never revising it. Revision is not failure. It is responsibility. Analytical thinkers revise without self-betrayal. Another false belief is that meaning must be grand. Meaning is often local, relational, and subtle. Analytical thinkers allow meaning to be sufficient, not spectacular. Another misconception is that authorship ends longing. Longing remains, but it becomes navigable. Analytical thinkers live with longing without surrendering agency. Another illusion is that choosing your life eliminates fear. Fear accompanies meaningful choice. Analytical thinkers carry fear without obedience. Another false belief is that standing behind a life requires external validation later. Validation may never arrive. Analytical thinkers do not postpone alignment. Another misconception is that authorship means rejecting structure. Structure supports life. Authorship chooses structure consciously. Analytical thinkers design constraints intentionally. Another illusion is that integrity is rigid. Integrity adapts. Values remain, expressions change. Analytical thinkers stay aligned across phases. Another false belief is that choosing your life solves existential questions. Existential questions remain. Analytical thinkers live well without answers. Another misconception is that authorship is a one-time act. It is a practice, chosen again and again. Another illusion is that life must feel meaningful at all times. Meaning ebbs and flows. Analytical thinkers remain aligned even during emptiness. Another false belief is that standing behind a life requires eliminating doubt. Doubt coexists with integrity. Analytical thinkers act anyway. Another misconception is that authorship makes life easier. It often makes it harder, but clearer. Analytical thinkers choose clarity over ease. Another illusion is that there is a final checkpoint where life feels finished. Life is ongoing authorship. Analytical thinkers remain engaged. Another false belief is that integrity must be visible. Integrity is quiet. Analytical thinkers live it without performance. The final truth of this audiobook, and the entire series, is this. A life you can stand behind is not one without fear, doubt, or uncertainty. It is one where you chose anyway, and accepted responsibility. Self-authorship does not promise happiness. It offers dignity. It offers coherence. It offers ownership. And when you look back, not at outcomes, but at alignment. You recognize the difference between a life that happened to you and a life you lived deliberately.